the whole intent of doing a trip in northern New Mexico in early June was to avoid snow. And, uh,
New
well,
Mexico did not deliver.
yeah.
Welcome to the Greens and Blues 14er podcast. This episode, Zach goes backpacking and then revels in the beautiful musical stylings of John Mayer. And then he walks through his adventures on North Truchas Peak and West Spanish Peak. Well, Zach, you're going to go through kind of a 2-for-1 episode with us with a couple of 13ers that you've tackled recently. But before we get into that, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Eric. Middle of summer hiking season. Going to talk about a couple hikes I did, and then I just recently got back from another one we'll probably talk about later. And getting to spend time hanging out with my kid. We've been to amusement parks, we've been to water parks, we've been hanging out. And since I'm an academic, I'm doing something like research this summer, which other people may not call research. So, yeah. How about yourself, Eric? What are you
Wait,
doing? What are
wait,
you
do
up
you
to?
sleep? When have you had time to rest? If you're
I'm not
doing all
working,
that stuff,
man. I'm on summer break.
you're probably busier now than when you're working.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I did think about that yesterday. Well, I was at a water park
Yeah.
with with my daughter, and I thought, wow, my life is really full right now. Like I don't need work.
There you go. Yeah. Just retire. Just, you're all done, right? That's all you have to do.
I would rather retire now and work a little bit in my 60s than I got juice right now. Let's do this. But
They say that youth is wasted on the young. So,
yeah.
hey, we're not quite so young, but we have enough energy. Let's use it now. And
Yeah.
yeah, we can work a little bit when we're 60.
Yeah,
That's
I'll
I'll
build
sign up for that.
I'll build wealth later. Yeah. How about yourself, Eric? How are you?
I'm good. Actually just got back from a work trip in Southern California in good old Ontario, California. So I actually enjoy visiting out there.
The
It's there's the
909.
909, yeah. Yeah, no, it's fun. There's lots of sun and palm trees, and in Ontario there's actually a 13er that Ontario kind of hides in the shadow of. It used to be called Mount San Antonio. I think it's called Baldy now, but
Mount Baldy, yeah.
yeah, so it's kind of fun to see. But yeah, so now I'm just excited to hear about your travails in the Sangres, both in your home state of New Mexico, but also in southern Colorado. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, there are some 13ers in northern New Mexico, and I hiked one of them. I planned on hiking three or four of them. Oops. Um,
It happens.
I'll tell you why that didn't work out. And then I also hiked West Spanish Peak, which I had never hiked before.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a early June trip. My daughter was hanging out with grandparents, and I had a window, and I decided to give it a go. So I'm excited to talk about North Truchas Peak and West Spanish Peak today.
So, in addition to just the location, how close you were to the Truchas Peaks, what else attracted you to that group? And also, what else attracted you to West Spanish?
So the Truchas Peaks are in north central New Mexico. So there's a couple clusters of 13ers in northern New Mexico. There's the Wheeler Peak group, which
Hmm.
is
Yep.
just slightly northeast of Taos.
And that's the
And
tallest in New Mexico, right? Wheeler is?
yeah, named after the, I think, cartographer John Wheeler,
Hmm. Okay.
who also has a Wheeler Mountain in Colorado named
Yeah.
after. There's Wheeler Peak, and I believe Old Mike Peak are two 13ers in that group. And then there's a cluster about 40, 50 miles south of there called the Truchas Peaks. And the Truchas Peaks they're probably noteworthy for a variety of reasons. If you look from the west towards probably Espanola or towards these old Acequia towns that are 400 years old that kind of dot the central New Mexico landscape, like Truchas and Trumpas. You can see the Truchas peaks. They're very auspicious. They rise up. If any of you have ever seen some Georgia O'Keeffe paintings,
Mm.
O'Keeffe has these paintings where she has red dirt in the foreground and then this kind of dark blue layer right behind that, and then these snow-capped peaks behind it. It makes for this kind of almost this rainbow of color. And those peaks are the Truchas peaks.
Oh, that's cool.
They're very remote. The nearest any of those is to a road is about 10 or 12 miles.
Oh, wow.
And there's a couple complications in hiking the Truchas peaks. One is that one of the primary modes of access, if you look at a map, you would say, I should hike in from the west. So from the west would be, I believe, the Rio Quemado drainage that comes, it kind of drops into essentially near Espanola. But there have traditionally been a lot of problems with vandalism in that
Oh, wow.
area. So back in the day, and I think this still occurs, people like to maybe have a few beverages, hop in the car, drive up the road, and smash out windows of people parked in the trailhead parking lots along Rio Quemado.
Oh, wow.
So as a result, the recommended modes of access are from the north. And that's what I did. So the route that I hiked into is called the Rio Santa Barbara, or the Santa Barbara River. By the way, pet peeve, just got to say this. When people say Rio Grande River, it drives me insane because you're literally saying river twice. So anyway, river, big river, or river, big. Um, so that's how I decided to access these peaks. But yeah, they're remote, and you don't get a lot of opportunities to do kind of alpine hiking in New Mexico, but
Hmm.
these are some of the best. So that's why I was drawn to them. I've always seen them. I'm a native New Mexican, seen those mountains my whole life, and always kind of looked at them like, I want to go up there. And I've never have.
Hmm.
So that was the allure of that. West Spanish Peak, the allure of that is it's just super prominent.
It is prominent. Yeah.
You see it if you hike Culebra string of peaks, it's always super visible from
Hmm.
those.
Yep.
And always looked at that too, and always thought, I want to hike that. So this was a way for me early season. The other attraction early season was they didn't have a lot of snow on them. There's a big asterisk there, and I'll tell you guys what that asterisk is in just a second. I thought they wouldn't have a lot of snow on them. So,
So you mentioned tackling the Truchas Peaks from the north. So do you want to describe kind of how you get there, what the road is like, getting up to however far you're able to go for not just the Truchas, but also West Spanish too?
yeah, the access for both these is great. Quite easy, two-wheel drivable, Toyota Camryable, I guess, on the
Toyota Echoable?
oh yeah. So the access for Rio Santa Barbara, you drive in on a dirt road from the town of Peñasco, and you just drive south to the Rio Santa Barbara campground, which is it's a dirt road, but it's a well-maintained, graded dirt road. There's like maybe a rock in there. It is easily two-wheel drivable. You drive in there and you actually park at the campground.
Okay.
Still a little bit wary of vandalism.
Mm.
Parked right next to the camp host, and she assured me that she would watch my car for me, which was nice.
Oh, wow.
And so you will need to pay to hike. So I think the day use permit or whatever is like, I think it's $7 a day. So this was a backpacking trip for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I paid $14 to park there, and I was more than happy to do so to support our National Forest campgrounds, but also the lovely camp host from Maryland who was going to watch my stuff. So yeah, this one, if you were to just try to do it out and back in one day, I think the round trip to North Truchas alone would be 22 miles or
Oh my gosh.
21 miles. So essentially 10 and a half up and 10 and a half down. I am not in that shape early in the season. Maybe later in the season I would be, but this was going to be a backpack for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I rolled in, had a big bowl of potatoes eggs and green chili in the morning in Albuquerque. Came in a little after lunch.
Sounds glorious.
Oh, papos con huevos or whatever. Yeah, so I came in a little after lunch and I knew I would just hike in the afternoon, set camp. So the access is, if you're going to hike those, unless you're, Laura Clark or Justin Simone, you're probably going to need to at least stay a night, if not two.
Yeah.
And if you look at the trip reports on 14ers.com, most of them are overnights.
Okay.
West Spanish Peak, access is a piece of cake. You drive to Cucharas Pass. So there's Colorado State Road 12 that connects Trinidad and roughly La Vida Pass. And it's like the Highway of Legends or Byway of Legends or something like that.
Okay.
You go to Cucharas Pass, and right off Cucharas Pass, there's a good route description on 14ers.com for this. You drive up the Cordova Pass Road, which was a pass that was constructed to connect La Veda with Aguilar way back in the early 1900s.
Yep.
And that road is good. It's a little rougher, still definitely two-wheel drivable.
Okay.
There's a campground on Cordova Pass. It is a non-reservable, first come, first serve campground, and it only has probably 4 spots. And there's maybe 1 or 2 open spots before you get there. So if your plan is to perhaps camp there on a busy weekend, then you'll need to get there a little early. During the week, like I did, I drove in at 7 o'clock at night, threw up my tent, and was ready to sleep it out. So
Sounds like there's
that's
camping options for both then.
yeah. I mean, Santa Barbara, you can camp at a
It's a campground
campground
right there. Yeah.
if you want to, or you can backpack in because you're probably going to have to do that anyway.
Mm.
So yeah, there's very subiable, a 1 on that scale, and really nicely accessible and roughly close to some towns too. So, you're from Trinidad to Cordova Pass about an hour, and from Rio Santa Barbara to Santa Fe, probably about an hour as well.
Okay. Well, let's hear about each of the hikes themselves. What kind of terrain did you encounter? How tough were the hikes? How many marmots did you see on each one? Let's hear about it.
So I'll start with North Truchas Peak. Truchas Peaks are, like I said, remote. So my first day, I just backpacked in. And I have to say, I have not backpacked in a while. I hate to admit this on this podcast. I've been reticent to backpack solo.
Mm.
I've always done it with friends. And I finally decided to do a solo backpack for the first time in maybe 10, 12 years, and actually really liked that part of it. But first day I hiked in, if you hike along the Santa Barbara watershed, the first 4 or 5 miles are gorgeous.
Mm.
It's a lush valley filled with, it was at the time that I was hiking it, filled with dandelions and irises.
Mm.
Really pretty. You're kind of following a creek, and the river was rushing and beautiful. It may be different now. They let a lot of cows loose. They graze a lot of cows up there. As I was descending, the cows were coming up and they were already kind of stomping out the meadows and stuff and eating them up. So it may not be as nice now, but when I hiked it, it was really beautiful. There's a couple major creek crossings. Those are on bridges.
Mm.
There is a third creek crossing, which is not on a bridge, but there are some logs to cross. If your intention is to backpack in, the first 4.5, 5 miles, there are plenty of spots to stop in meadows and camp. If you go past that, and for anybody that looks at a map or that looks at trip reports, if you go past about 5 miles and you start going up a series of switchbacks, there is no camping for the next 2 miles after that. I learned that the hard way. Really wanted to hike about 6 miles. Was getting hungry. Nowhere to camp. So you have to go up about, if you want the next available spot, it's about 7 miles in. And so I got to a spot in the early evening. This was my first warning sign. There was a fair amount of snow.
Oh.
And so I pitched my tent in between little snow drifts. And on bare, somewhat dry ground, But yeah, that was my first day. My second day, I got up and started hiking. And this is where this will probably be an atypical trip report. So for those of you that are hiking midsummer, you don't have to worry about this, but I immediately encountered lots and lots of snow.
Mm.
As I said, the whole intent of doing a trip in northern New Mexico in early June was to avoid snow. And uh
New
well,
Mexico did not deliver.
yeah, it's a north facing slope, so I should have known.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But yeah, I started to encounter a fair amount of snow, such that finding the trail was quite difficult. You'd see like a little fragment of a trail here and there, and someone had hiked up before me, but they got lost at a couple points.
Mm.
Could see the tracks go
Mm-hmm.
up and then turn around and come back down.
Oh
Um,
boy.
so I spent a fair amount of time that morning post holing and finding trail. I always eventually found it. I never lost the trail. Your goal is to keep heading essentially due south along this trail, but and a compass might do you some good if you find yourself in that situation, but eventually found my way to the saddle between North Truchas and a 12er called Chimayosos and hiked up that. And then I hiked up from there. It's actually a fairly easy ascent. I say fairly easy. This was early season. It was my first 13er and I was dying. Um, I was like, oh, I was in Oklahoma 2 days ago.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not
and
good.
to be clear, you didn't have snowshoes, you didn't have micro spikes, nothing for snow hiking. Did you bring your ice axe? You probably wouldn't have brought that for something like this, right?
This is where, since my dad has been on the podcast, I was telling my dad about this hike. He's like, son, you got to take your micro spikes and your ice axe. And I was like, oh, dad, I don't need any of that stuff. I'm good. And turns out I did. So actually, I don't know if flotation would have done me any good. The snow had frozen enough overnight that it really wasn't an issue.
Okay.
The real issue was route finding, and I didn't need the ice axe either. So what I did need was probably another week of sunshine to melt
Mm-hmm.
off
Yeah,
some of this
just
stuff.
get the snow out of there. Yep.
I eventually did summit North Truchas. The plan was to go to from North Truchas to Middle Truchas to Truchas Peaks and then descend off Truchas Peak and then find my way back up to the saddle between North Truchas and Chimayosos. But unfortunately, when I got to the top of North Truchas, I had spent a lot of time in the trees,
Mm.
and it was super windy because it was heating up in the valleys below. It was super windy. I was tired, and I was thinking that I had to backpack out. That was a self-imposed thing. I had told myself I was going to just backpack out that same day. And I looked over at the traverse, and the traverse looks totally doable. But
Mm.
I just decided at that point to not do it.
Your
I
heart
would
sink just a little bit. Just you're like,
a,
oh, I could have done that.
a little bit learn from my mistakes, listeners. If you're planning on the Truchas Peaks, plan on a 3 day trip.
Mm.
1 day to backpack in, 1 day to do the all of the peaks, and then 1 day to pack out. I think that is the ideal trip, and I really should have done that. Trying to limit it to 2 days meant I kind of rushed it a little bit. I felt rushed. So I did not end up doing the other two peaks. And I regret that now because if I want to go back and do those orphaned peaks, I'm going to have to hike in again.
Do it
I'm
again. Yeah.
going to have to backpack in
The
once
whole
more.
production. Yep.
So I then descended, found my way back through the trees, got back to my campsite, packed up and hiked out. And I was back in by about 3 or 4 that afternoon. So, I mean, I had my timing right, but just that alone was like 22 miles. I'd say with my meandering through the snowy woods, it was 22 miles and about 14 of it with a full pack. So it was a heck of a trip. I was pretty sore afterwards. I would heartily recommend the trip. I only saw past the switchbacks, I only saw one group of 3 people, and that was it
Wow.
the whole
Wow.
trip. You'll see a few more people in the lower part of the trail because it's a popular trail to hike through those pretty meadows, but pretty remote. I did not see marmots or much wildlife, but I heard it.
Yeah.
I heard a number of branches snapping in the middle of the night, and I think
Mm.
things were walking around my campsite. A lot of birds, a lot of woodpeckers pounding away in the mornings and whatnot. But yeah, great hike because you're the most prominent point for at least 40, 50 miles around. The views from the top of the Truchas peaks are pretty remarkable.
Mm.
I had a lot of visibility. I could see pretty much all the way to the Wheeler Peak group. I was looking out west into the New Mexico desert. I could see near Abiquiu and all kinds of places far off. So beautiful hike. If you want some solitude and a little taste of New Mexico, that's a great hike to do.
And you want to hike a marathon, you can do that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. If you do the other two Truchas peaks, it's probably a marathon. It's
Probably,
probably
yeah.
about 26 miles
Mm.
all in. So that would be a fun trip and I think a good trip to do with a family if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So, and to see some cows.
See them eating their food and trampling on your pretty flowers. So Zach, for at least North Truchas, then, what would you rate it in terms of difficulty, in terms of the sweat factor? How would you rate that?
I don't know why when you say sweat factor, I just thought of the CNC Music Factory because it's that song gonna make you sweat.
We need, yeah, yeah.
I always thought the guy that said gonna make you sweat till you bleed was the coolest. Like I wanted to be that
Yeah.
guy when I
Oh
was
my
like
gosh.
12 years old.
You might have to hike the all of the Truchas peaks every day for like a couple of months in order to get into the shape that guy was in.
Gonna make you sweat till you bleed.
Yeah.
Um, I would say in terms of just difficulty, class two. And everything that I've seen about the traverses over to Middle Truchas and Truchas would indicate that it stays at a class two, maybe two plus, with a little bit of route finding and maybe the occasional use of your hands. In terms of grunt, I mean, anytime you have to do 21 odd miles just to get to one peak,
One peak.
one peak, people. I would rate the grunt more like a probably a four. It's
Mm,
just there's New Mexico. You're gonna start low. I think the Santa Barbara campground's like 8,800 feet, so you're gonna gain some
mm,
elevation
yeah.
moving up. It's the Sangres. Sangres, you start low and you finish high.
Mm,
I would say just gruntiness. It's slow, right? Like you're gonna do it over 11 miles, but
hmm.
it's 11 miles, so I'd say a three or a four on that one.
Okay.
Since we're deeply interested in songs,
Hmm.
I've been giving this some thought. I don't have a song for this one, Eric.
Oh wow.
I'm sure some people when they hike, they have a playlist in their head, right? Like
Mm,
they have songs kind of going through their head. Because I was kind of going through the desert a little bit to get there, I had U2's Joshua Tree in my
oh,
head.
there you go.
And
Yeah.
and so maybe something like One Tree Hill from the backside of
Oh, there you
U2's Joshua.
go. Good pick.
What a delightful song that is.
It is.
Um, Bono wrote that about a friend of his who had died, I believe. So,
Oh wow.
yeah, maybe that song, it was just in my head while I was hiking. I don't know if that was indicative of anything or not, but
I love it.
lovely peak. I give it a 4 out of 5. I do wish I had been able to do others. And when you're done, you can go to Santa Fe and eat something,
Yeah.
or you can go to Taos and eat something. And there are infinite number of options in both those places. I
Infinite. Those are big places then. If they're infinite options,
well, not in okay.
that's pretty
Taos is
good.
finite. Taos. If you're gonna be in Taos, this is maybe my one chance to rep Taos cuisine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you're in Taos, you should have breakfast at a place called Gutiz, Gutiz. Their eggs Benedict are everything there is delightful. Their baked goods are delightful. Their chai is delightful. Their tea is delightful. Their eggs Benedict are sublime. It's the best eggs Benedict I've ever had.
Wow.
Um, they put a little red chili in their chai, and it's just everything a chai needs.
Wow.
Um, and in their hot chocolate too. Delightful place. I know everybody else goes to Michael's for breakfast, and that's good, but it's not Gootie's. If you're gonna be eating New Mexican in Taos, go to Orlando's. That's pretty good. If you're there with a loved one or someone that you want to love, uh, you should go to a place called the Love Apple. It's a restaurant built in an old Spanish church. It's a beautiful date spot. Bring cash, bring at least $100. It's a little expensive, but it's really good. If you find yourself in Santa Fe, go to Yelp. There's like a million options there. I will say Santa Fe is known for New Mexican food, but there's a really legitimately great French place in Santa Fe called Clafoutis, which has great breakfast and
Really?
great lunch. Yeah, it's really fantastic. So,
That's
um,
cool. Wow.
yeah, great. I'm gluten free, but I will break my diet and get sick just to eat one of their croissants.
Oh man, that's quite an endorsement.
Yeah, yeah, it's that good. So,
Wow.
those are some good places to go. There's great tapas in Santa Fe. There's all kinds of fun stuff. Everybody's got their favorite places there. If you find yourself in Albuquerque, do what I did. Go to Wex and get the papas bowl, which is potatoes, eggs, bacon, green chili, and just get the big and just carb up.
That just sounds like something I could eat every single day and not get tired of it. I don't know why. It's just that sounds fantastic.
It's the perfect food, Eric. It's
Oh
it's
my gosh.
protein, it's fat, it's carbs, it's green chili.
It's
That's everything you
aren't
need.
those the four food groups in New
Those are the
Mexico?
four macronutrients that
That's
you
all you
need,
need. Yeah.
right?
Well, do you have anything else, Zach, you want to share on North Truchas before we move on to the hike and the rest of West Spanish?
I think we should hustle over to West Spanish Peak and talk about that for a moment.
All right, tell us about that hike and some of your experiences there.
So, my experience there, first of all, for those of you that are looking up that use 14ers.com, there is a route description there and it's good. There is no need to deviate from that route description. It really works. The hike is really straightforward off Cordova Pass. You're just going to hike east on a very flat trail for about 2 miles, 2.5 miles. It's a really easy hike for the like it'll take you like less than an hour. And then the last mile and a half is just straight up the mountain. Not
Oh,
like
wow.
hard. It's class two, it's rocks and grass, good footing the whole way, but just steep.
Mm.
And the grunt factor is a little higher on that one. I really wanted to talk about this because I wanted to bag on a couple people that I met at Spanish Peaks. Some interesting characters I met at Cordova Pass. So I arrive at Cordova Pass at 8 p.m. The sun is setting. It's a beautiful sunset. And I notice there's a car. I will not identify these individuals. There's a car of a couple college age dudes, though, that are there. And one guy is like setting up camp and doing things, and another guy is sitting in the car with the engine running, listening to stuff, which is fine. I set up my tent. They get a fire going. They're relatively quiet. It's all good. I'm asleep by 9:15. Everything is fine. The world is good. At 4:50 a.m.,
Uh-oh.
I hear these knuckleheads wake up and start banging crap around at 5 in the morning. And then presumably Mr. Sit in car with heater on, he goes to his car, fires up his car at 5 a.m. and leaves it running for about 40 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And so all the tent spots are within walking distance. I can hear these guys
Mm-hmm.
talking. I can hear everything. And I hear these dudes making a ton of noise. There's another guy in the campground. We later talked and he wasn't very happy either. These guys are just making a ton of noise, leaving their car running at 5 in the morning, just totally rude. Eventually they get ready. I can hear them get ready. They're about to set off. I'm up at this point, right? But I'm
Yep.
still in my tent because I'm kind of mad. So I hear them get ready and then they proceed to do, and sorry for people that do this, but they turn on some really, really loud music
Gosh.
and that they're going to hike to. Like you can hear this music on a phone or a speaker off a
Oh
phone
yeah.
or
Yep.
something.
Yep.
And then they take off up the trail and you can hear the music kind of slowly getting fainter and fainter as they go up the trail.
And I'm sure it's not like a lullaby or anything either
No,
to help
no,
you get
no.
back to sleep. It's
No, I can tell you what it was, Eric. It was John Mayer.
oh,
Um, yeah. And they were playing it later when I came off the peak and they were in their campsite. They were blasting John Mayer through the entire campground.
John Mayer
Your
fans.
your body is a wonderland.
Oh
Um,
wow. Okay. So
yeah.
like the poppy John Mayer, not really the bluesy John Mayer.
No, this was maybe their ode to Jennifer Love Hewitt. I don't know, but it was terrible. So I'll talk now about the hike, and we will return to these knuckleheads in a minute.
Oh, there's more with them? Oh my gosh. Oh
Well,
man.
there's a funny moment here.
Okay.
So to give the hike in a bit more detail, the hike is really straightforward off Cordova Pass. It's signed well, except for one moment. There is a sign at about a mile in that does not seem to indicate the proper direction of the West Spanish Peak route. You
Uh-oh.
just need to stay on the most prominent trail possible. You'll come to a sign about a mile in. I forget what the sign says, but just stay right at that sign.
Hmm.
You want to head towards Apishapa Pass at that sign, not later, because later you'll have a fork and it'll say West Spanish Peak and you want to take that one. But
Okay.
I got lost on that. So just
Oh no.
FYI. So you want to head up towards the base of West Spanish Peak. It's really obvious where you're headed. And at that point, you'll get to the base of the peak. There's trail-ish elements to it. There's some cairns. Staying on those is good. Sometimes you should not trust cairns, but this stays ridge proper for the most part, and that's really where you want to stay on this hike. You do not want to deviate much to the right at all. That way lies pain. So you just want to stay going up the mountain, and it's pretty aggressive. You're going to climb, I think, 1,500 feet in about a mile and a half. So it's about a 20,
Oh wow.
25% grade.
Oh wow.
But the footing's good. The rock is good. You're just going to have to take your time.
Hmm.
A number of trip reports say it probably altogether takes a couple, 2.5 hours to do it up and then another two down. And I buy that.
Okay.
It's about appropriate. There's no false summits. Once you get to the top of the ridge, you can see the peak and that's it. And it's a nice walk over. For me, there was still snow on it because it was early June, but for people doing this at kind of peak times of the year, I suspect there won't be much snow on it. I had the peak to myself. So as I was ascending, I saw my beloved friends from the campground
The John Mayer
descend.
fanboys.
Yeah, John Mayer fanboys. I like that name, JMF.
Yeah.
Um, I saw them descending, but they were descending the wrong ridge line.
Uh-oh.
I don't know what they had done to get themselves off course on their descent. And I looked, this is terrible. And I don't know if I should admit this publicly, but I looked down and it looked fine for them to descend that. It was just going to put them off the trail quite a bit. And I thought, there was that moment, where you think, should I help these people? And then I just bypassed that moment. And I was like, no, they're good. I think these guys can. And
They'll
I
figure it
could
out.
I could hear them talking. They're like, "Oh, that guy's on the ridge over there." Like, they were probably ridge across, but I could still hear them chatting. And I was just like, "Yep,
Yes,
sucks
I am.
sucks to be you guys on that scree." Yeah, make sure on your descent that you go back to the ridge that you ascended.
Okay.
But I had the summit to myself. I had a glorious windless summit all to myself. Beautiful views of the Culebra stretch of peaks. I could see all the way to the Truchas peaks in New Mexico,
Oh
which are
wow.
probably 100 miles from there.
Yeah.
I could see the Wheeler group. I could see the Blanca group and the Crestone group. quite the view from West Spanish Peak. And then I could see the plains. Heck, I could
Mm,
probably see to Texas
mm.
on that day and definitely to New Mexico. So a really beautiful summit. Really, for me, it became just because of that summit experience, one of my favorite hikes.
Oh, that's really
It
cool.
was really just a beautiful solitary summit. I don't know if you get that kind of solitude during the peak months. I think a lot of people use West Spanish Peak as a training
Hmm.
climb, and I can see why you would. It's very much in that vein. I had a deeply enjoyable time on the top of West Spanish Peak.
That's awesome. So effort, it sounds like it was a little on the aggressive side to get all the way up. What would you say there?
I would say the Truchas Peaks are a four. This would be a three. Or now, if I hadn't done the Truchas Peaks 2 days earlier, or North Truchas 2 days earlier, I might have felt a little worse, but I was
Hmm.
a little more acclimated. For those of you that live in Colorado and are acclimated, it might be a two. That last slog is tough, but it's not enduring. You're not up there for a long, long time.
Okay.
You're you're kind of making your way up. So Subi scale, I'd give this one a 1.5. In terms of approach, class two, maybe even one plus.
Mm.
Minimal route finding. You'll have to do a little bit, but I mean, unless you're just utterly foolish, you just stay on the ridge and you're fine. And effortculty, three, 2.5, three-ish.
Okay.
Um, I would hardly recommend this as a warm-up climb, a good early season hike. I think a lot of people do it for those reasons. I think it works as that. So you're hiking on a south facing aspect, so it's not going to hold as much snow later. So,
Yep.
that's why it would work for a good early June hike.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds really good. If it was a song, what would West Spanish Peak be?
Since we're
Is this a
just
struggle
going
too?
with yeah, I have, usually these come to me, Eric, like in
Yeah.
the shower or
Yeah.
something. Maybe since we're on the U2 theme, Spanish Eyes, which is
Mm,
a B-side from, I believe, The Unforgettable Fire.
mm,
What I want to evoke, and maybe listeners can help me here, is this feeling of, with both these peaks, is this sense of these are both kind of peaks that are alone.
mm-hmm,
A lot of peaks kind of sit surrounded by other peaks, and we're going to talk about yours in the next episode. But
mm-hmm.
these peaks are West Spanish Peak. There is East Spanish Peak, but it's a 12er, and it's like if you look out at that ridge, it's a couple miles
It's a
away.
ways away from West. Yep.
Yeah, and then the next prominent 13ers are an entire valley across. You have to go across Cucharas Pass to get there to the Maxwell and Chiquita group and all those peaks. The Truchas peaks, I mean, they're on their own. So I don't know what the song is, but I want a song that evokes this feeling of being prominent and alone. And I that's what I was really shooting for here. And I could not find that song in my head
Mm.
of maybe you know it, Eric. Your catalog of music is much more expansive.
I'll have to think about it. Prominent and alone.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. I was thinking independent is kind of what it sounded
Mm,
like too, as you're describing, but
yeah.
I don't have any songs for that either. So, well, Spanish Ice sounds like a good way to go there.
In terms of places to eat, you're close to Trinidad if you're going to be hiking West Spanish Peak. There's a good barbecue joint. I forget the name of it that I ate at in Trinidad. There's a lovely little Chinese food place. If you just want to, after a hike, just want a ton of rice and sweet and sour chicken or something just truly bad for you, that hit the spot.
There you go.
Is so those are some places, and then they have all the other things, McDonald's and so forth. But for those of you that can eat flour, perhaps pasta or just carb loading in Trinidad, Nana and Nono's pasta is utterly delightful.
Ooh.
They have cavatelli or gnocchi, and it's handmade pasta, and the sauces are
Oh, wow.
delicious. So I heartily recommend them as well. So lots of good
How can you
places to eat,
how can you go wrong with Nana and Nonos? What a great name for a restaurant. I love that.
especially an Italian food place, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how it should be.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's very good. I haven't eaten there in a while, but excellent. I think it's in a deli, so like they're like carving meats and stuff while you're eating, but so good. So
That sounds fantastic.
yeah,
Well, Zach, do you have anything else for us on West Spanish Peak?
I think that's it, Eric. I want to tidy this up with a nice little bow on it. For people looking for good early season hikes, I think West Spanish Peak and maybe an early season backpacking trip. The Truchas Peaks are a fantastic way to go. Really scenic, great peaks with very easy access in terms of at least getting there. And you can enjoy some solitude in these places. These are not the usual places that people go, but really reclusive peaks and reclusive places to some degree, so long as no one is blasting Your Body as a Wonderland in the campground at noon.
Oh gosh. Well, Zach, if anyone wants to reach out and ask you how many woodpeckers you heard or what other John Mayer songs you heard, how can they get a hold of us?
Well, they can find us at greensandbluespodcast@gmail.com. They can also find us on our Facebook group, or they can X me at NM Hiker Person. You may see us out on the trail this summer. Eric and I are efforting to get some Greens and Blues decals. And
Yeah.
if you see a Subaru with a Greens and Blues podcast decal on it, probably one of us.
It's either going to have a Colorado or an Oklahoma license plate, and it'll
Yeah.
have the decal, and you'll know it's one of us.
So feel free to tuck a $20 bill underneath my windshield wiper blade if you see an Oklahoma car with that, or with a Colorado College decal on it. That's
There
all
you go.
good.
Awesome.
So yeah, those are the ways to find us, and we hope you all are enjoying your summer hikes, and give us some feedback on both our hikes and your hikes this summer at the various places that we just listed.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.